Welcome to Live with AI Virtual CES 2022, a webcast series featuring exclusive interviews with industry experts and thought leaders on the topics of ADAS and autonomy, as well as virtual demonstrations of AI's CES Innovation Award-winning Foresight LiDAR, a solid-state and software-centric solution that adapts and optimizes its scan patterns in real time. All of our broadcasts are being shown live across all of AI's social media channels, including Facebook and Twitter, as well as YouTube and LinkedIn. You can follow us there to get notified of all the broadcasts, or if there was one you would like to watch again or one that you missed, you can find all of those archived on our social media channels. And everything you see here will eventually be archived at a later date on AutoVision News. Our next guest is an industry expert for sure, Sam Abuelsamid. He's the principal analyst of Guidehouse Insights. Now, Sam is an all-around content creator and technologist. After more than 2 decades as an engineer in the automotive industry, he switched to writing. As a journalist, product communications writer, and now industry analyst, he has covered the current state of business and technology and where it is going in the future. Sam writes, quote, "My background in automotive engineering gives me a perspective on how the process of developing cars works and an in-depth knowledge of the new technology being developed. Sam is also the author of Recharging the Car, chronicling the development of the 2011 Chevy Volt. It's an ebook compilation of his writings about the Volt from 2007 until 2010, and it is available on Amazon's Kindle store." Welcome to the program, Sam. Thank you for being part of our CES broadcast today.
Thanks, Carl. Great to be here with you today.
Yeah, so Sam, I wanted to pick your brain on this because in the automotive industry, we hear from ADAS to autonomy. ADAS is always first, and then autonomy is always second. But your thought leadership is suggesting that maybe it should be the other way, that maybe we should go not ADAS to autonomy, but autonomy to ADAS. So I'd like to please share your thoughts on this for our viewers, going from autonomy to ADAS. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, going back about a decade or so, when the whole process of trying to develop automated vehicles really started to take off in the years following the DARPA Grand Challenge, the thought from a lot of people was, okay, we're putting all these ADAS features, adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist, blind spot monitoring, into vehicles. We'll build on it. We'll use those as building blocks and gradually build up, add more and more functionality till we eventually reach full autonomy. That turned out to not be the right approach. You really needed to think about the autonomous problem as a holistic problem and design the system as a complete system to really function properly and be safe and robust. But as time has gone on and that the scope of that problem has become, the reality of how hard that problem is has become clear, and the timeline for level 4 or level 5 vehicles has slipped out into the future. What we're seeing now is that suppliers and automakers are actually kind of going back the opposite way, taking the lessons learned, the technologies developed for autonomy, and bringing that back down to ADAS systems to make them more capable and get it out there into the marketplace.
Right. So, Sam, something that I'd like to get your thoughts on, because you're a fellow writer and journalist like myself, and so it seemed like for a while there, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we were hearing things like autonomous cars are going to be in mass production by 2020. It was really like autonomous cars are coming, and it's a sold and done deal. And then we started to really dive into it. We really started to dive into some of the vehicle perception technologies. We started to, have considerations for cybersecurity, for infrastructure. And like you said, that timeline has been pushed out. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, did you see that too, or where we were, sort of maybe promoting autonomous driving, but not, maybe considering the whole picture? What are your insights on that?
I was, I hate to say I told you so, but I was always a bit skeptical of that timeline, at least that, that we would reach it at scale in that time frame. Having worked on electronic control systems as an engineer myself, I know, and safety critical systems, I know how tough that is. And when you start talking about something like fully automated driving, there's a lot of things that we as humans do as drivers that are really hard to replicate in software. And for all
Hmm.
of our flaws, and we have lots of flaws, this is a really complex task that we do, but we're actually surprisingly good at it. We drive 3.2 trillion miles a year in the US alone,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
we only have crashes, not fatal crashes, but all crashes about an average about every half a million miles. So that's about an average of about every 30 years for the average driver that goes
Sure.
15,000 miles a year. So
Right.
it's actually really hard to do better than humans. And we haven't yet gotten to that point where we demonstrated that at the things where the humans are most likely to have crashes, that automation is actually any better at it.
Hmm. So when it comes to the rollout of autonomy, then Sam, as we sort of, gradually, not maybe instantly progress like we might have thought, but as we kind of gradually progress, we get into consumer acceptance, everyday car buyers. There's those of us in the industry, we're around it every day, but there's everyday car buyers out there, who may not trade their vehicle in, but, once every 5 or 10 years, right? So when it comes to the rollout of autonomy, in your mindset, what are some of the important things that need to happen for that critical piece of the puzzle to come together, the consumer acceptance piece?
Well, you have to build trust. When
Hmm.
you're handing over a task, where the consequences of failure are potentially life and death. It's not
Sure.
like a photo sharing app. If your photo sharing app crashes, it's inconvenient. You restart the app, no big deal.
Right.
At
Right.
minimum
Right.
viable product level is very low. Minimum viable product for a vehicle is really high, and
Hmm.
so people have to trust that the technology is going to be safe and reliable. And that's where actually starting to bring some of that technology and the lessons learned into ADAS systems that we're using today to augment those and make human driving safer, is I think is a key milestone in trying to build that trust. And so when we have LiDAR in our vehicles for hands-free driver assist systems and level 3 systems over the next few years, people will see, hey, yeah, this technology actually works, and it does make the car better. And when you get ready to start rolling out fully autonomous vehicles on a larger scale, now people are more likely to trust it.
So, Sam, and along those guidelines, building trust as well. For me, and I've seen this, and then last year, the Partners for Automated Vehicle Education, Consumer Reports, the SAE, the National Safety Council, they have all come out and joined this initiative. But that, ADAS systems are just too confusing. And I'm not picking on anybody here, not picking on a particular manufacturer, but I spent most of my career in automotive retail. So just looking at it, what's the difference between adaptive cruise control and intelligent cruise control and dynamic radar cruise control? What are your thoughts on this idea of all these different names for all these different systems? What's your insight there? Is that something we need to address or not?
Well, I'll happily point the blame on this one at marketers. Everybody wants to create the impression that they've got something unique that nobody else is doing, and
Right.
so part of that is giving unique brand names to the technologies, even when it's basically the same technology, the same functionality. That's why those things you mentioned: smart cruise control, intelligent cruise control, radar adaptive. It's all the same thing. And so I think one of the things that we need to do is change the way we think about these technologies. First of all, start moving towards standardizing the naming. Get away from distinct brand names for things that are not distinct from each other, so that people see adaptive cruise control, they know what it does, and
Mm-hmm.
then also describe it in terms that are actually meaningful to non-engineers.
Sure.
I know what this stuff means, but for the average consumer, they don't know what this means. So we need to educate people about what these functions can do, and more importantly, what they can't do, because
Yeah.
that's actually, I think, one of the biggest things. Tesla, I think, has one of the problems that Tesla has caused by calling their systems full self-driving and autopilot. They create an impression that it's capable of doing things that it can't actually do.
Right.
And we need to have everybody come, line up, get in line, and describe what it can't do as well as what it can do.
And some of the most recent studies, Sam, consumer surveys have pointed to the fact that, by and large, people are warming up to autonomy, but they feel like autonomous cars and the technology has not had enough testing. That it just hasn't gone through enough testing and validation. So, what are your thoughts on that, and what can we do in the industry? And is that testing and validation process, is that also linked to consumer trust in some way?
Yeah, the testing and validation is absolutely linked to consumer trust. People have to see that that you've done the home. The engineers have done the homework and
Hmm.
made sure they've double checked all their numbers, double checked that everything really can function properly. So showing people how the stuff is being tested, where it's being tested, and to roll it out in a responsible manner, instead of just throwing it out everywhere. What the way the approach that they're taking, of doing it in specific locations where it works, and demonstrating, having it out there in pilot programs, get people in the vehicles, get them used to riding in these vehicles, and see that they're not crashing all over the place. And then as you build up that trust and you build the confidence that it can work in new locations, you test in more locations. And simulation is also a very key part of this. It needs to go through a lot of simulation, because you can't replicate a lot of the things that happen that cause crashes. Are things that happen very infrequently, and so you're not going to be able to test all those things when out in the real world. So the simulation testing and doing these pilot programs to show that it really is safe, and have comparisons to human drivers in the same kinds of environments.
Right. Now, Sam, you're here in Detroit, as I am too. Recently, AI came to town with their shadow van. I know that you and I both took a ride in it. We were showing earlier in the day today an actual shadow van demonstration. So I want to get your perspective on adaptive LiDAR, want to get your perspective on the shadow van and how that might be beneficial for OEMs to implement that type of technology.
Yeah, I think the premise behind adaptive lidar is a really important one. A lot of the early lidars that we saw, going back to the DARPA challenge days, they scanned in a fixed scan pattern. Because
Hmm.
of limitations of the hardware and the software, they had a fixed scanning pattern, and you have a certain number of dots in the field of view, and anything that happened to
Hmm.
fall between those dots, you might not catch.
Right.
And what AI is doing with adaptive lidar, and some other companies are doing some similar things, is having a scan pattern that varies over the field of view. Because when you look down the road and when you're driving as a person, you have your peripheral vision. You see things in your peripheral vision, but you're not focused on those things. But you'll catch other vehicles in adjacent lanes. You'll catch pedestrians on the sidewalk. But those are not the focus of your attention. And the
Hmm.
same thing is true with adaptive lidar, is you're putting a higher density of points in the areas that are most important, on the road, in the area, between the horizon and, a little bit above the horizon, where your vehicle is actually going to go. You don't care what the
Hmm.
sky up above, because we don't have flying cars yet. But
Right.
you want to get the areas that are most important and still see the rest. But
Hmm.
it's like your peripheral vision, and they call that foveation. So it's there, you see it, and if something catches your attention in those areas, then you look over. You see a pedestrian, you're going to glance over and get it in the center of your vision. That's what adaptive lidar is doing.
Right. And we're discussing LiDAR now, and we're at the beginning of a brand new year here in 2022. Sam, from your perspective, from your vantage point, how do you see the LiDAR markets shaping up this year in 2022? What are your thoughts?
And this is the year when we're really going to start seeing a bunch of lidar coming to market. There's a number of vehicles that have lidar that are going on sale now, and will be over the next several years. Cars like the Lucid Air, the new Mercedes-Benz S-Class and EQS
Hmm.
in Europe, and a number of vehicles in China are all going on sale this year with lidar sensors built in. Later this year, Volvo is launching some stuff as well. And
Yeah.
over the next several years, we're going to have a lot more cars that have LiDAR on them, that are utilizing them as part of these driver assist, these level 2 plus hands-free systems like GM's Ultra Cruise that launches next year, as well as level 3 systems that Mercedes is launching. And then we'll see more and more of that going forward over the next several years, eventually, adding on the level 4 fully automated systems.
Sam, a number of our viewers watching today, as part of CES are obviously, tech enthusiasts, and with tech comes automotive. So, one of the questions I'd like to pick your brain on, you and I are both from Detroit. I see your background there, the Mustang GT, the 5-liter Mustang that Dave Parasak and his team designed, that was chronicled in the Netflix documentary, A Faster Horse. So, Sam, you and I are both former Ford employees. We're here in Detroit. We love to drive. We love performance cars. We love muscle cars. And there may be a section of our audience out there that, although they like technology and they're interested, they're worried that they may never be able to drive a car like a 5-liter Mustang again. So do we get to a point, and this may be way in the future, do we get to a point where we're not driving and the muscle and performance cars that we love are extinct or obsolete? Or what are your thoughts on that particular topic?
I think the time when we're all riding around in automated vehicles and not driving is probably significantly far out into the future. Maybe not within my lifetime, and it will eventually get there probably. But then again, if you look back at the beginning of the 20th century, most people were riding around on horses. Cars were still a relatively new thing. And, today people still ride around on horses, not
That's
as
true.
many, but they still do it,
Sure.
and for those, I think for the driving, the commuting that a lot of people do most of the time, they don't really care about driving. I mean, you commute to the
Right.
office or taking the kids to school. That's not
Yep.
something that's really enjoyable for most people. And
Right.
if you can switch off and let the vehicle do that work, and then when you get out on a nice country road, be able to take over control, or have a car that you can take to a track, or take out for a weekend drive on a Sunday morning in the summertime or springtime. I think that's probably that's when we can enjoy cars like the Mustang or my Miata or anything else.
Oh yeah, yeah. What year is your Miata, Sam?
I have a 1990, very first model year.
Ooh, a first generation Miata. Yeah.
Yep.
So you are a driving enthusiast for sure.
Oh, I am. Yeah.
Sam, I feel like I could talk to you all day. I just before we wrap up here, do you have any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to share? Maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about Guidehouse Insights and the work that you do. But any final thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Sure. Yeah. I think despite the fact that, as I said, wide rollout of highly automated vehicles is still, a number of years away. I mean, we're starting to see some now in limited deployments, but really broad rollout is still a ways away. I think we are rapidly starting to gain the benefits of all this investment that's been made in AV technology and the sensors, the compute, the software. It's coming to our vehicles. It's going to make our vehicles safer. I think that's a good thing for everybody. And, as far as Guidehouse Insights, we are the market research arm of Guidehouse Consulting's Energy Sustainability Infrastructure Group. We do syndicated and custom research work for clients. You can find us at guidehouseinsights.com if you're interested in learning more.
That's fantastic. Sam, thank you for joining us and being part of our broadcast today.
Pleasure to join you today, Carl. Have a great day.
You too. Sam also is the author of Recharging the Car, which chronicles the development of the 2011 Chevrolet Volt. It's an ebook compilation of his writings about the Volt from 2007 until 2010. It's available from Amazon's Kindle store. Given Sam's background as an engineer and a journalist, should be a fascinating read and written by somebody who understands the technology, but truly loves to drive. Our next live stream will begin here shortly at 10:30 a.m. Pacific and at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be talking to Keith Dirks from AI. Now, he is a rail and logistics expert. So we've talked a great deal on this webcast series about the automotive applications for LiDAR, as well as ITS and industrial applications. We've talked a lot about trucking. Now we're going to finally dive into rail. Keith has some very interesting insights. So that will begin in our next live stream, 10:30 Pacific and 1:30 Eastern. You can find the next live stream on all of AI's social media channels, which includes Facebook and Twitter, as well as LinkedIn and YouTube. You're watching Live with AI Virtual CES 2020.